Welcome to Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor's Touch of Torah with Rabbi Barry Silver, and we welcome him back from his couple weeks off of the program, and we thank everybody for being part of this tonight. It is June 14th, Flag Day, and we're going to be talking about a parsha in Numbers and BEHA'ALOTECHA. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for organizing this. And I thank everybody who's joining with us in this interesting discussion about the Torah passage. It's called Va-Dor. And again, a lot of these words sound really strange and nobody really recognizes the word at all. But there is a part of the word that you may recognize, and that is the word aliyah or aliyah. Aliyah and aliyah mean the same thing. It means to go up. And aliyah is when somebody comes up to the bima, usually for some type of honor. And aliyah means when someone moves up by immigrating to Israel. They're called making aliyah. And when you leave Israel to live somewhere else, you're called a yored. Yored means to go down. It's a verb that's used with rain. Hageshem yored, the rain comes down. So Va-Dor has aliyot or aliyah in it. It means when you go up. It's talking about when you're going up to the land of Israel. And then it talks about some of the rules that will apply as you go. The first significant word in the passage becomes the name of the passage. So it's called Va-Dor. But the fact of going up is not the most significant thing in the passage. The most significant thing in the passage, there's two major lessons that we learn from this passage. So let me set the stage for it. And like a lot else in the Torah, when it gets really, really serious, there's humor. And I maintain that is how the Jewish people have survived all these years. People say, why do the Jews survive over their enemies who are more powerful and they've gone by the wayside and Jews are still here? And there's a lot of different reasons people come up with. Some say because the other groups have this love of power and we have the power of love. Others say because we have strong families and that is the essence of our survival. We passed on traditions. Others say we have a mission, and people with a mission are going to have strength and fortuitousness and they're not going to be pushed around. And we have all that. But another reason is our sense of humor. So when the Jews were at the Red Sea, their backs were to the sea, the Egyptians were closing in, it looked like they were about to die. What do? They crack a joke. They say to Moses, weren't there enough graves in Egypt that you would have to bring us out here to die? And so here it's kind of comical in a way what's going on, because what happens is Moses is with the people in the desert and they're hungry and they say we don't have anything to eat and they're complaining. So God, according to the Torah, performs a miracle. Most modern Jews don't accept the validity literally of this miracle, but it teaches an important lesson. A miracle happens. What is the miracle? According to the Torah, there's 600,000 people in the desert and they have nothing to eat. God provides for them literally food from the sky in the form of manna. And manna is said to descend and materialize like dew in the morning, and it tastes delicious. It's like a beautiful cream, like cream of wheat or something. It's a beautiful meal. And the people have that. So what do the people do? Do they say, oh my gosh, this is incredible. We're getting food from heaven. This is a miracle. No, not quite. What do? They complain. After a while, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting tired of this manna. I'm getting sick of it. Can't you give us some meat? We want some real meat to eat instead of this vegetarian fare. This is terrible. So this is the humorous part. So Moses then goes to God and he says to God, hey God, Why do I have to put up with all of this? What did I do to deserve all of these gripes and these complaints? Did I bear these people as my children? Am I their parent? No. So why do I have to put up with it? And then Moses says, I wish that I could just die. I'd rather die than have to deal with these complainers and these malcontents. Let me take my life. Let me die. And then God says, okay, Moses, calm down. It's going to be okay. I'll take care of everything. I will give them meat. And then God says, okay, you want meat? Here it is. So what does he do? He has a west wind. The wind's always at his side, because the wind is like, the word in Hebrew for wind and spirit are the same, ruach. So God causes a wind to blow. And when the wind blows, a bunch of quail fly over. Quail that can feed 600,000 people. And then at the right moment, they drop from the sky, and I suppose they die on the spot. And then the people have meat to eat. But that's not enough for God, because God is really ticked off. So he says to the people, it says to Moses, who then communicates, you want meat? I'll give you meat till it's coming out of your nostrils. And the people gorge themselves on meat, and they're stuffing their face, and they're eating all this meat. And then what happens? God does something which the vegetarians still talk about to this day. He sends a plague upon them, and the people stuff their face with meat, and then they start dying off by the thousands. And the vegetarians today say, you see, eating meat is not a good thing. In fact, God doesn't like it. God gave them vegetarian food to eat, just like he did in the Garden of Eden. They complained about meat. He gave it to them, but he causes disease. And now they say, and look what happens today. You got vegetarian food to eat, but you want meat. Now meat's causing heart disease and cancer and all types of things. So there you go. So that's the main occurrence that takes place in this passage. What is the lesson? Well, if you're a vegetarian or of that ilk, you could say the lesson is don't eat meat, it's not good for you. But there's another lesson, a very, very significant lesson. And that's the one that I was raising in the beginning. People literally had food from heaven. That was an incredible miracle. And they weren't satisfied, because after a while, they got used to it and they took it for granted. You and I, if we live in the United States, we have food in abundance. It is a miracle. It comes right out of the ground. Organisms that channel energy from the sun, convert it into matter, and then the DNA preserves that trick so its descendants can keep doing it. And then it alters the DNA slightly so there's variations, so that there's all different types of foliage. So we can eat spinach and tomatoes and broccoli and cucumbers and all types of things. We look at the people in the Bible and we say, that's ridiculous. Nobody would ever look at a miracle in the face and take it for granted and not appreciate it. And then we ask, aren't we those people? Don't we grumble and gripe? We go to a restaurant, hey, you overcooked my food. Or, hey, got to eat the same food all the time. Or, hey, the cost of food is going up. You know, this is a problem. The Torah is trying to tell us something. Count your blessings. Everything you eat, every morsel of food that you have on planet Earth, it's a miracle. Rejoice in it, and you will always find happiness. That's the real significant lesson of BEHA'ALOTECHA. And that's there's other stuff in it, but that's pretty much the, if you'll pardon the expression, that's the meat of the passage. And there is a lot more in the passage than meets the eye, if you look below the surface. So that's all I have to say about the passage. I'll invite other people to share their thoughts, their questions, their comments. Go right ahead. Anybody at all? Oops.
So the name of the parsha, which you said means when you go up to the land of Israel. So how does that relate
to
what happens in that you
Well,
related to.
I skipped over a lot. It says when you go up, Beha'alotecha, cha means you. Be means with or in. Ha'alot is to go up. So that word itself only means in your going up. And then the next words say to the land of Israel. And then it starts to give you a whole bunch of rules and regulations about things you're supposed to do. Those rules and regulations are not even done anymore by anybody. So even the Orthodox don't do most of these things, virtually none of them. So I skipped over all of that and I went right to the essence of the passage. Most rabbis, when they're interpreting Beha'alotecha or preaching on it, that's the part that they go to, not all these other things that are kind of similar to what's been said over and over and over and over and over again. By the way, you know, Hebrew is very economical. So in English, you would have to say, in your going up. Hebrew is just one word. Be, in ha'alot, going up, tacha, your. In your going up is just one word. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments, or anything? Yes, Valerie.
Yeah, well, I had an event this past weekend that went fairly well, but the comments the next day, even though everything was good and the food was good, I didn't have a whole variety of bagels. So suddenly, 2 days later, oh, the bagels were horrible. The bagels weren't horrible. They just didn't have a variety of bagels because I didn't want people going to all the other tables, picking out bagels that they want with their hands from everybody else's table. But they didn't get that. So all of a sudden, everything was wrong. I mean, it was, I bit my tongue and I walked out. That's all I did.
Right, good for you. You did the right thing. Let me give you the epitome of this passage that I experienced. And I might have mentioned this before. So, and I was in my late 20s, early 30s. I had a really great gig. I'm doing Passover Seders on a cruise ship. And they actually paid me to take a cruise and to bring a guest. So I'm like in seventh heaven. It's like, this is incredible. I've never experienced anything like this. So now I get to the buffet and my eyes are wide open and I can't believe it. Like all this food, all this variety, all you can eat. And it's like most of the day. And I'm thinking, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And now I see people who are going and they're complaining, this food is no good and this is all you got. And I'm thinking, I really give these people credit. You know, I mean, you can look at all of this food and all this abundance, and I love the food, great food, and you can still complain. You must be really, really good complainers if you see all of this and you can still complain. And what it actually, and I joke around about it, but it actually makes me sad because if all of that doesn't do anything for you, I mean, if you could go in the lap of luxury and be on a cruise, and everybody's catering to you and you got everything you want and you don't do any work, you know, you're just eating and shopping and doing stuff and you're still not happy, it's not because there's something wrong with the food, something wrong inside. And it was, I think it was Samuel Adams who said that anybody who thinks that they're going to find happiness by changing the outside surroundings rather than changing themselves is laboring under a very sad misimpression. And that's really what this passage is all about. So Valerie, I sympathize with you. And I think they all need to read Beha'alotecha or maybe come to Shabbat this Friday. Maybe you can send them a little note saying, hey, come join us over at Mariposa.
I actually would say that if I didn't think it was wasting my time.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, there is something else I'd like to share about what's going on in the life of L'Dor Va-Dor. L'Dor Va-Dor's board agreed to file a lawsuit as a plaintiff against the abortion law that was passed in the state of Florida to try to drastically restrict abortion rights. It's set to take effect on July 1. The law is pretty restrictive, so normally it wouldn't pass muster under the standard of Roe v. Wade, but now it looks like Roe v. Wade is on the chopping block, and it looks like the Supreme Court is going to do away with Roe v. Wade. So all of a sudden, this draconian law now looks like it could be the law of the land in Florida. Planned Parenthood and ACLU have filed a lawsuit, and so has L'Dor Va-Dor. It was my desire and intention to file with them in the same lawsuit and the same complaint, but they had different ideas. So the lawsuits filed separately. The lawsuit by Planned Parenthood and ACLU focuses on only one issue and one cause of action. And that could be succinctly said that as far as women are concerned, it's my body, I do what I want. That's the end of it, that's the only issue. And that's a significant issue, but it's not the only one. The other issue that's extremely significant is that this is an effort by fundamentalist Christians to write the law of abortion for the whole state of Florida. The vast majority of, well, I don't know vast, but the majority of Christians don't agree with them. Most Christians are pro-choice. Some of them very, very much so. Some of them have led the charge towards fighting for abortion rights. So they want to act as if they're speaking for all the religious community, all the Christians, all the Judeo-Christians, everybody. That is not the case. They do not speak even for all Christians. They certainly do not speak for Jews. Our gripe is not with Christianity. Our gripe is with the fundamentalists who want to impose their religious views on everybody, especially when their religious views are not the most enlightened. If this became the law of the land, it would prohibit the practice of Judaism for pregnant women in many circumstances. The reason is because, according to the right-wing Christians, if there's a choice between saving the fetus and the fetus wins, the mother loses. In Jewish law, the mother wins and the fetus, it's sad, but the fetus does not prevail over the life of the mother. So a Jewish woman is not allowed to sacrifice herself if it comes down to it, even if her mental health is going to be jeopardized, her physical health is jeopardized, she has to save herself. The law wouldn't allow her to do that, so it would prohibit her from practicing Judaism. Even the Orthodox have no need for this law because they don't need the state of Florida to tell them when they can have an abortion, when they can't. They don't need it. They already have Jewish law to tell them that. They don't need to have an abortion law to tell them when they can and cannot have it. So it's arrogant, it's self-righteous, it's a violation of women's rights and Jewish rights and the separation of church and state. And so we've taken a stand. There's another aspect of the law that's very disconcerting, and that is that it makes no exception for the mental health of the mother. So after 15 weeks, you can't have an abortion anymore. And sometimes women don't really know, or they're not really sure at that time, or they have a lot of turmoil and they haven't decided. What happens is that it will take this scenario where, let's say you have a teenager and she becomes impregnated through incest. She's not allowed to have an abortion after 15 weeks, regardless of how traumatic it would be to bring that pregnancy to term. Or she's raped, now she has to bear the child of the rapist, regardless of how much trauma that would bring upon her. That can never be used, no matter what, after 15 weeks. So the law discriminates against the mentally ill. If you want to put it in more graphic terms, you could say that a rapist wants to control the woman's body and does so by force. And then the government adds insult to injury by controlling the woman's body by saying that you have to now bear this child. It's not a good law. A lot of groups have rallied against it, but very few have actually filed suit, but we're one of them. Since the lawsuit was filed, L'Dor Va-Dor has been approached by other organizations that want to get involved and support the case. One very strong group that we have support from is Jews for a Secular Democracy, who understands that the separation of church and state is what really makes this country great. And when you join the two together, it's always bad news for the Jewish people, and then it's bad for everybody else. So we want to keep religion strong and pure. We want to keep the government and the state strong and secure. And the best way to do that is to let them go their separate ways and not merge the power of the two. When they're fused and merged into one, the result has been inquisitions, pogroms, crusades, ghettos, Salem witch trials, and a lot of other horrors that afflict the Jewish community and then everybody else. These issues are raised in the complaint, and I'm going to ask Sharon, if she could, to put a copy of the lawsuit and some of the talking points on the website of L'Dor Va-Dor. So if you'd like to actually read it for yourself and see some of the talking points and share it with other people, you'll be able to do that. The lawsuits attracted a lot of interest, including from CNN, the Associated Press, Politico, and a TV station in Tampa. Interestingly, our local TV stations, none of them found it interesting enough to put it on the air. The national news thinks it's big news, but the local TV chose not to air it. But it was, I think, in the Palm Beach Post. So
Rabbi, that's not true. I saw it on Channel 12.
Oh, did you? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I stand corrected. Yeah, I sent it out, and I didn't get any response to it, but I guess they just aired it without doing an interview.
Well, they
So
didn't mention, according to Stanley, they did not mention Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor. They just said a synagogue in Boynton.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. I didn't see that. All right. Anybody else want to share anything, ask any questions about the lawsuit or make any comments?
But we had kind of broached this topic some time ago before the what hit the fan.
Yeah.
And it's always been an issue when laws interfere with religious rights, the right of the religious. So, if this is really the case, and this law is literally juxtaposition to the Torah, I don't understand why it's getting so much footing, because politically speaking, historically speaking, in politics, the third rail is religion, and politics and politicians very often shy away from anything that has to infringe upon anybody's religious rights. So I am really concerned and confused why this is going as far as it has gone, given the situation that it is really infringing on religion, or the aspect of a religious right. So that's yeah.
You raise a very interesting and important question. And that is why the proponents of this law and the pro-life, what I call pro-lie movement, has tried to hoodwink us. They want everyone to believe that this does not infringe on anyone's religious rights. The way they frame the issue is, this is an issue of the religious against the atheists, the religious, ethical people against selfish women who only care about themselves and don't want to experience the joys of motherhood. This is a conflict between religious Christians and heathens. And there's no other religious views except views that don't respect life. It's a conflict between life and those who have no respect for life. That's why I believe this lawsuit is so important, to raise the issue from a religious organization, from L'Dor Va-Dor, to say to Planned Parenthood and ACLU, privacy rights are important, but this is not the only issue. The way they're framing it is wrong. And moreover, the Jewish law and Christian law is being misrepresented by these people. They do not reflect religious teaching, as you say, in the Torah. In fact, I got a call before this, about an hour before this session started, from someone who is berating me. And he was a Christian, and he was berating me and saying that you're going against the Bible. So I asked, what part of the Bible are you talking about? He said, well, the Bible doesn't believe in abortion. I said, where are you getting this from in the Bible? Well, everybody knows that. So I say, well, I happen to read the Torah in the original, and I've read it through. There's nothing in there. So he said, oh, you're misinterpreting it. So I said, no, I'm not interpreting it. I'm reading the original. There's nothing in there. And then gradually he let me explain that the Torah is pro-choice. The Torah has nothing in it prohibiting abortion, and Christian scripture doesn't either. Both at the time of Jewish and Christian scripture, they were aware of abortion, and surrounding cultures made laws against it, but our Jewish ancestors did not. So they clearly left that decision up to the woman. And there's no passage in Jewish or Christian scriptures that says life begins at, and then they give you a particular time. Nothing says it. But there's a bunch of passages that indicate that it was equated with, life was equated with the onset of breathing and birth. Genesis, God created man and woman, and it says, and then he breathed life into it. They took on a neshama and they lived. So when they were created, they didn't live until they had breath. Ezekiel and the dry bones, God breathed life into them, and then they lived. If two men are fighting, it says in Exodus 21:22, and a woman bystander is injured, the one responsible pays a fine. And if she dies, he pays with his life because it's a life for a life. But if she's pregnant and miscarried, he pays a fine, indicating the fetus was not considered a life because it just said a life for a life. It was considered part of the woman's body. Ubar Yerech Imo is from Maimonides. And so the Bible believes that life begins at birth. You and I might challenge that. You might say, well, that doesn't really make sense. I think it starts somewhere before that. Maybe so. But if you're going to base your views on the Bible, and Jesus said, I came not to change a jot or a tittle of the old law, then you have to go with life beginning at birth. So their position, as you say, Valerie, it is not biblical. It is not based on the Bible. It's based on modern day people who have an agenda, usually against women, and they're using that to try to control women's lives. And the bottom line from what I gather, because I've litigated this area, is the fundamentalists don't like sex out of wedlock. And they consider women to be the temptress, the seducer, like she seduced Adam with the apple. And therefore they want to punish women. The men don't get punished. You're going to have sex outside of wedlock and you're going to get married? Okay. Now you pay the penalty. Now we're going to make you bear the child. Because they've said to me, if we have abortion, it's too easy. There's no consequence to it. We can't do that. That would be terrible. There's got to be a consequence. They have to pay. That's a really sick way of looking at the issue. Anybody else?
Didn't you bring up at one point when we were talking, you had brought up the fact that somewhere either in the Bible or in the Talmud, that if a woman supposedly or a husband can prove that this child is not his, that there is actually herbs and what have you that are actually stated in the Torah to induce a miscarriage or to induce abortion. It's actually
yes. Yeah, very good. That was actually just last week. Thank you for reminding me. Numbers 5:31. That was just last week. Yeah, the man thinks that the woman's pregnant with somebody else's child, brings it to the priest. Priest gives her a potion, and then they submit it to God. And if it's not her child, miscarries. Right? So God is the executioner and the abortionist. And we also know that in science tells us that the majority of fertilized eggs, after fertilization, the majority of those eggs don't make it. They spontaneously abort, usually in the first few minutes, hours, or days. And usually, very often, because there's some kind of defect. Apparently, getting the sperm and egg and the chromosomes and matching them together and producing a healthy zygote, it's not all that easy. And getting it to implant in the right way, there's problems along the way. So many times, far more often than human-induced abortion, the fertilized egg is lost. And so you could say that God, if you believe such things, God is causing all of those abortions, and he's taking all of those lives. And by the way, the fundamentalists who say life begins at conception, they don't have a funeral for those lost embryos and zygotes, and they don't trace their age back to conception. If you ask how old you are, they'll tell you from birth, not from conception. And so if you take a census, they don't say, let's take the census from how many people are pregnant. Those should be counted as human beings for census purposes. No, they don't. It's only on this issue. So there's a lot of hypocrisy there. And it's good to see that there's a lot of allies that we have in this struggle. The main way we're going to win this and other struggles, join together, take a stand, speak up, and that's what we're doing. Anybody else? All right. In that case, I just want to let you know, I really appreciate having a board that has the guts to take a stand. It's really good to be part of a congregation that doesn't just talk about things, but does them. And it's really great to be at Mariposa. We're meeting rent-free, and you're welcome to join with us at 7:30 at Mariposa on Lyons and Hypoluxo. We're having a good time out there. The locals are very nice. Carol has got a beautiful voice, and the service 2 weeks ago was a little bit long, so I learned my lesson. The last one was about an hour, and we're shooting for about an hour. We call it a happy hour. It's an inspirational service. It's a lot of fun, and hope you can join us and tell your friends.